Hello. All right, I think we're live. Oh, hey Ashby, how's it going? Good to have you here. Just wondering if you guys can hear me all right, and if you can see the screen and everything. I had to reinstall a couple of apps just to make sure that everything is working smoothly. Hey Roy Miles, how's it going? Cool. Thank you. All right. Alrighty. So I don't have anything planned today, like anything like I've done in the previous streams of a specific tool or feature. I thought just today to just kind of like get back into it, just wing it and maybe do some creature work and some sketching something. So that's hopefully that's cool with you guys. One thing I want to show you guys is just a little technique that I've been playing around with. Maybe you have seen on social media what I've been sharing, which is just a way to blend materials in ZBrush directly. It's kind of like using the generators in Substance Painter, but in ZBrush to a degree. But I think it's pretty cool, and I think that you might benefit from it. And it's also to kind of like add up or build on top of what I shared last week or early this week actually, which is just a quick guide on like a cheat sheet to compositing, or the method that I use for compositing all the images that I use. So I use this character that I have here on screen, and basically that guide walks you through, you know, how to put together the image, the final image, and I'll show you that in a second. Actually, let me just put it here, and then I'll share it again towards the end. I'll put it in the chat. So if you go to that link, I don't know if you can see it. I don't know if my messages are actually getting in there. Can you see this? Nope. Seems to me that I'm typing and the app just doesn't like it. Huh. Not sure what that is, but I'm just trying to type a message in Restream. Can you guys see any of my messages in the chat? Because that might be the problem. Anyway, now I'll show you maybe an easier way to do it that you're probably more familiar with, which is just going to ZBrush Central. By the way, how cool is the new ZBrush Central? Really excited about this. I realized that, so this is the character. By the way, thanks Pixology so much for the top row. It's really cool. I realized that this guy was here in the top row, but before that it was somewhere here, and I didn't know this. I didn't realize this part before was the top row. And this one sort of like changes, kind of like move around towards the right, and then appear on the right, and then I just realized he was here. But this is the guy. So if you go to ZBrush Central right now, you can click on this thumbnail, and this is kind of like the final image that I did for this guy, and some color variation. And this is kind of like what I wanted to show you today, because this is something that I did in, I mean, I did it originally in Photoshop, but then I figured out this way. I figured out this way of how to do it in ZBrush directly, a little bit easier. I just took in some sliders, and it's really easy to, you know, take advantage of the filters and the NPR capabilities in ZBrush 2019 to produce this type of variants before you move any further. Just kind of like producing, you know, variations in color, I guess. This is an alternative image. Most people that when I share it like the one on the left, so I kind of like did this one. I still prefer the red one. You might disagree with me. I don't know why I like this one more. It kind of like spoke to me when I was picking the color. This is the character that I have on screen. So if you go to this one towards the end of this post, I have a link to another post that, I don't know, I think it just got lost. But anyway, it's called the cheat sheet for compositing. So you can also type it. You can also share it, search for it directly in ZBrush Central, which is pretty cool. So you can search for it here at the top, and it's basically a PDF, but it comes with the PSD file, so the Photoshop file, the final high-res version that I did of this guy. It comes with all the layers. I try to name them properly and just organize everything so that you can kind of follow it. And it comes with the individual passes as well, so you can basically start from scratch and try to replicate the look and feel of this character if you wanted to. And throughout the process, hopefully you learn something new. That is kind of the idea. So if you go here at the bottom and you click this button here that I put, just an image, but it has a link, it will send you to, let's have a look. By the way, big shout out to Mr. Debris. I don't know the name exactly, but he's the one who sort of like mentioned it, that you could do some of the things that I mentioned in the towards the end of the quick guide, or sorry, towards the beginning of the quick guide, that you could potentially do it in ZBrush directly, like render a bunch of different passes. And I know the ZBrush to Photoshop plugin does that. But then, based on his comment, I started like doing a bit of a test, and that's how I came up with the blending of the materials. And I'll show you that in a second. So anyway, you click on this, and here it is. Or also you can just go to 3dconceptart.com. It's not a website yet. It's just this. it's just this landing page. So yeah, you put your details here and you grab the thing. So hopefully you find that useful. So again, you can do a search in ZBrush Central for the cheat sheet for compositing, and it should be there. All right. So let me just check the chat. Hey everyone. Hey Victor. Hey Nara. Ashley. Glad that you're excited about this. And it's what material do you mostly use for polypaint? For polypaint, I use a custom material which actually you can find in the ZBrush guides, which is called the Albedo Paint, or Albedo. I don't remember what the name is. I'll show you where you can get it. Because it is just a simple material based on the skin shade, just tweaked a bit, that it has less information on, like, it doesn't have much material information, and you can concentrate on the texture and the color. So if you go to ZBrush guides and go to resources and ZBrush materials, by the way, because today, like I said, I don't have anything planned to do. Like, I'm just gonna start sketching stuff. I'm happy to answer any unrelated questions, not specifically of what I'm doing, but if you just, I don't know, you have any questions of something that I could answer, I'm happy to just, you know, divert a little bit and branch out, which I tend to do anyway. So if you go to Sculpting Materials, I think, no, let me just try to find it. I forgot where it is. I'm sure it's here. And if it's not, I'll just put it. Here we go. It's called the Albedo Paint, and it's under the miscellaneous materials. So if you go to the materials in the resources, ZBrush materials in the ZBrush guides, and just click on Miss, and it's here at the bottom. It's called Albedo Paint. So you'll see it's mostly just a white material. It has a tiny bit of shading, and that is kind of like enough to see a bit of the volumes, to understand what the silhouette is a little bit, and the silhouette of the volumes, and the rest is just completely shadeless material, so you can paint and concentrate on the details. All right. Hey Ed, how's it going? Perfect. All right. So I'm gonna show you again this character. So this is just a render in ZBrush, and I'm using some Vpr filters, so it looks a little bit more, you know, contrasted and maybe a bit more interesting than just a render without MPRs or filters, really. So here's the model. This is already decimated, so it doesn't have as much details. So if I get closer, see, it's just a bunch of polygons. So I already decimated this one because I thought, oh, maybe it would be cool to print this guy. So this one is decimated, and it has like a, I don't know, like a rock beat platform, don't know. So that is the guy that I made for that compositing, but this is already decimated. However, I decimated it based on not only the details, but also based on the poly paint. So I don't know if you guys are aware of that you could decimate based on poly paint alone or with poly paint and detail, which is really, really cool. And that way when you decimate, so I don't have the project here because it's a little bit heavy, the one for this guy, but I have the decimated one. So if I turn poly paint and let's go to skin material, so you'll see that most of the details are still there. The original project, the one that I used for the compositing, has a bit more detail, but again, the distance and the framing of the character, if I were to just render this at this size, it's probably not noticeable. So the decimation does a really good job. If you get really close, you start to see that it's not, it's not great. I mean, it's not. It is great, I think, but it's not as polished and as detailed as the kind of like the original mesh. But again, I'm not gonna get that close to this guy anyway for a render, so I think the decimation is a pretty sweet deal here. Can you open the eyes of this guy here? I did actually. I did. I shared a little video. I'll see if I can find it. This is funny. Hola Jorge, saludos. Where's the concept behind this model, Pablanda? Give me 1 second. Right. So the concept for this guy, I don't know. I think it's just one of those things that it's always in the back of my head, and probably subconsciously is based on something like the guy from, I think it's Hellboy, the one that has like a massive kind of like a flat head. I don't know. It's just a mixture of things. But I was in Thailand on my holidays, and I was on the beach, and I started like just sketching this. I'll show you the original concept, which I share online as well. But alright, so I started doing these things. Right, so I started with those things, just working on some ideas for the head. It's because I thought it would be cool to do a head, a head with that shape. Yeah, then I did some more, a little bit more polished. I don't know if you guys can see that. And then, yeah, and then just came up with this sketch that, I mean, it's vastly different from the final one. So this one is more pointy and it has like a pointy nose, and it has these spikes kind of like coming out. Yeah, this type of thing. But then, I don't know, I started creating like this, I don't know if you can see this language based on these figures. And I thought, it would be cool to, just put something together that kind of have, like, it has that ancient feel to it. Maybe the symbols and the more squarish things are kind of like Azteca or like Mayan type of thing. Anyway, it's not. It's based on that sketch, but I didn't put too much effort into conceptualizing what it means or anything. It's just I thought it was cool. That's the truth about this one. Let me see the chat, and I'll show you the real trick here. Actually, I'm gonna show you the render, because that's gonna get you excited, I'm sure, and then I'll go to the chat. So if I have this render right now, like here, based on this poly paint that I did, and I do Vpr render, take a look at this and what happens with the colors and with the materials. It's pretty cool. There you go. So this is a render. I changed everything within ZBrush. So a simple render, it just changes everything, and you'll see I have kind of like I said, like generators with the gold going on, and I have more specular in this area, and I have a MatCap somewhere here. So it's a combination of materials within ZBrush based on a few different things that I'm gonna walk you through today, which is it's pretty cool, I think. Hey Jose, how's it going? And Becca Mood, I follow your comic render style for creating MatCap with MatCap rubber, but the end material ended up too metallic. Any suggestion how to make it flat color result from the grabber method? Should I start with a material with a metallic slider? Alright, so to answer that question, I think I can show you something really quickly, which is you can, after you create the material and after you have the MatCap based on the MatCap grabber, you can go to material, and here there is a let me just try to remember where it is. MatCap maker. So under the material, the last one, MatCap maker, this one allows you to change a lot of things. So you can go from a fairly metallic look towards something that looks less metallic. And you can use the gloss, the saturation, the backlight, the contrast, specular, all of these things just to tweak it, right? And this, just play around with all these. They're, for the most part, very self-explanatory. So I'm not going to get into this, but if something is looking very metallic, you can use this MatCap maker to tweak the material once you complete it. One thing that you should keep in mind, just to reply to that question, is that if your highlight, when you're grabbing points or you're selecting markers in the image that you're using as a reference to create the MatCap, if you are selecting the highlights, if you're selecting color as the highlight, so in other words, if the specular or the highlight has color, that is very likely going to look like a metal, because the metal will reflect the light. I mean, some metals will reflect a colored light. For the most part, everything that is non-metallic will reflect white light, or not white light, but the color of the source of the light. So if you actually give some tint and some color to the highlight, that will make it look like metallic. I don't know if that makes any sense, but hopefully it does. Don't worry, I know about it. I was curious about the real just 2D animation. Ed, I forgot what Ed asked. Sorry about that. Carlos, ¿qué tal, Pablo? ¿Qué tal, Carlos? The Angel of Death of Hellboy. That's right. That is, I mean, it's similar just because it doesn't have eyes. I guess that's kind of like my reference. After I finished it, I was like, oh yeah, that could be that guy. But also like a Silent Hill type of character. Not sure. Alright guys, so cool. Right, so this is the this is kind of like the thing that I wanted to show you today. But before we get into the more like nitty gritty of how to set this up and just blend these materials, because as soon as I move, you'll see it changes back to the default material. I'm just using the skin one, but I don't have any materials assigned, so I can just switch between any material that I want. The only thing that I have is polypaint, but when I render, it's like grabbing different materials. And let me just do it one more time, and I'm gonna point out. I'm gonna bring. Oh, where did I put it? 1 second. So here we go. Because I haven't started. I have to reinstall my little Epic Pen app that I use on the streams. Here we go. Cool. So now I can kind of like point at certain areas that you can focus on when I do the render. So if you look at this area, it's going to have a different material because it's purely based on the specular. If you look at these areas, which is just green color, all these areas are going to be kind of like gold. And there's another material, but you won't see it here. But anyway, let's do a quick render and just focus on these kind of like highlights that I made for in the yellow. There we go. And obviously, you can see a little bit of the other material. Actually, is this one here, or one of the other materials, kind of like towards the border, like this kind of bony material that is kind of gray. Also, you can see it here a little bit as well, and even here, just blending with these blues. So this is one material. This is another material when you're getting all these highlights, all these speculars. And then the third material is like obviously the gold over there. So this is like really exciting for me because I can do all this within ZBrush as a quick concept and figure out if if it had legs, if I want to pursue like a more, you know, polished version of what I can see in ZBrush, or I can just spend the time and just do it in ZBrush. But you know, I think it's pretty exciting. So before I get into this, what I wanted to show you is something that I'm sure you've seen before, but I don't know if anyone uses it, and I think it's pretty powerful. So let's go to a simple sphere, and what I'll do is I'm gonna just subdivide this a couple times. Again, I'm using the skin shade material, and what we can do is just select any material. It doesn't matter which one. I'm gonna select the material, the M for material, and fill that object. So now we have this kind of like, yeah, painted into just the material painted into the sphere, and no color. So the color is white. Now if I keep the material selected, so in other words I'm only painting with material, I can just tweak my brush. This is the standard brush. I just got rid of the C add, and I have the M selected, and I can select a different material. So let me just select something that is going to be very obvious for you guys, something very specular. Yeah, I'm gonna go for this one, the golden beetle. So now with this, the thing with material is different from actual poly paint. So when you paint in material, you're actually painting the entire polygon. When you're painting with just color, you're painting the vertex, and ZBrush is doing a gradient or a blending between the point that you painted and the adjacent points. So in other words, when you paint with material, it's going to be very, very harsh, the transition, because it's purely based on the amount of polygons that you have, and there's no gradient between materials. So when I do this is very, very harsh, right? So you can see those are actually polygons. If I turn on polyframe, and this is a dark material, but hopefully you can see. I'm going to clear this up. Alright, so when you paint with material, you'll see that ZBrush basically fills the entire polygon. When you paint with poly paint, is different. You paint the actual points. So you paint this little point, for example, with a color in poly paint, using poly paint, and ZBrush is going to take the 100% of this color here, right, towards the 0% if you don't paint it, of the adjacent points. Hopefully that makes sense. Basically, all of these points that are sort of like surrounding this little point that you paint with poly paint, and that's kind of like a basic concept, I know, but if you don't know, it's good to have it, good to have that understanding. So ZBrush is going to take these, so all of these points are at 0% color or white if you haven't painted them. But if you have this one in the center, it's going to do kind of like a gradient from 100 to 0. So you end up with something that looks kind of like this. And the only reason I'm showing you this really quickly, and I know this is very basic, but it's just to have a good understanding of what I'm going to show you in the next part. So you see, it's kind of like a gradient from 100 to 0. So that's why it looks a little bit softer, and you can get very, very detailed in ZBrush using poly paint. However, when you use material, basically this is what happens. ZBrush is only painting, so it's painting the entire polygon. That's basically what I wanted to show you. So based on that, so you'll see as I move around, it has basically these materials are two MatCaps, so they have the light embedded already. But if you wanted to do something a little bit softer, which you can't, because like I said, you're painting the entire polygons, you would have to subdivide it quite a bit, even though it's going to be very, very harsh, right? So what I wanted to show you is, if you want to do a render of this, I'm going to go to my filter. I want to turn off all the filters that I'm using, and I'm going to show you these ones in just a bit. So if I do just a quick Vpr render, this is the result, and nothing spectacular. But then within the render settings, I think it is render properties. So if you go and open up the render properties, you'll have obviously where you control the properties of your render, what you want to render, and all that. So there is this little slider called Material Blending Radius. Again, it's been there for ages, but I don't see many people using it unless that you use materials in ZBrush. For the most part, what I see is people on the internet when I check like new work and things that have been posted. If there is, for some reason, if there is something like a variation in materials within the work, is generally a full different subtool. So like if you have a skull and you have the teeth, maybe the teeth are different from the skull, like are golden teeth or something like that, or you have like an armor, the entire armor will be a different material and so on. So, but if you want to have different materials within the same subtool, kind of like painting them, you can just take this slider. I'll show you. I'll exaggerate it. I'll put it to 15, and then do render, and that's gonna blend the two materials really nicely. See? So it's kind of like blurring them between each other, and that is a way to like make the transition super softer. I'll do even more. Let's see what 41 gives us. Just keep in mind, if you increase this material blending, the render time is also going to increase, because it's something that is applied after the render. It's kind of like a filter. But it's different from the blur filter, because it just blurs the transition of the materials. But if you have like something like poly paint, it will remain sharp. All right. So hopefully that gives you some idea of something different that you can play around with. It's just this slider. That's nothing else. You just paint with material or different materials, and then use the material blending radius to get this type of result. And if you don't, then this is pretty much what you get. Cool. All right. So let me just check the chat. Go back to my character. Hola Pablo, le entraba una pregunta. Las grecas que hiciste en el personaje las hiciste con máscaras y booleans. So Rudvik is asking if all of these details were done with booleans and masks. So the answer is yes and no. So I did use masks, but I did use masks based on poly paint, and I didn't use booleans in this case. I just used extraction. So the ones here that I wanted to have two different types, so the ones sticking out are just masking and, well, poly painting first, just black and white, creating a mask, and then extrude them or extract them using the extract function on the subtool subpalette. But these ones here, I use just a sculpting tool. So I use the layer brush, and then I use the morph saving a morph target, and then I use the morph. I'll show you how to make these ones in just a bit if you want. But that's pretty much it. There's no UVs. This is just poly paint, nothing else. Hey John, how's it going? Good to have you here. And yeah, but that's pretty much it. So before I jump into, what time is it? There's plenty of time. So before I jump into kind of like the sketching session and all that, I'm going to show you how to set up the Vpr filters so that you get like the blending on materials, because it's pretty cool. So let me just get closer. And let's do a render. So this is just going to give me the normal Vpr render with nothing else. So you can see I have the shadows. I think the only thing that would be different from like the default render is that I soften the shadows a bit and tweak the. I don't think I have ambient occlusion in this one either, actually. Yeah, so just shadows. All right. But just having these like this, I originally did a different poly paint, and then I just went back and decided to go with the red one. But if you do something that has quite a bit of contrast in terms of the hues, like very different hues, that's gonna work better for the material blending. So, because again, ZBrush is gonna use the difference in hue or intensity, the cavities, the depth, the Fresnel effect, all of those features, or all of these all of these concepts are going to be implemented in the Vpr, in the filters when you do the Vpr. So if you have more contrasting colors, like in this case, it's going to work really well. If you have like just a washed up color that doesn't have too much variation, it might not be as effective, the method that I'm going to use. So maybe it's too specific, but I'm sure you can play around with it. So if you go to Vpr Filters, so the first one, so I have only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yeah, seven filters in order to get that bluish with gold look. The other ones are nothing, but I'm gonna use those so I don't destroy the other ones. So just selecting the first filter, actually I'm gonna reset it, right? And yes, I reset the filter. If you select the first filter or of the 12, and then you click filter, there is this one here at the bottom. It's called material shading, right? So it's the only one sort of sitting on its own row. And the material shading allows you to add a material, any material that you want. And this is why ZBrush, sorry if I'm pronouncing that not properly, but ZBrush in the comment on the ZBrush guide, on the ZBrush Central post, he said that it would be good if you just set up all the materials that you want to render within these filters, and then you just do a single Vpr, and that way you can just select or turn off the different materials and save. So it just kind of like save you a few steps, which is just changing manually materials and doing the render. But other than that, that's essentially it. So with this material shading, you'll see nothing happens if I turn it on and off, because it's sort of reset to nothing. But let's go to material shading to 100%, and then what you can do is go to modifiers, and you have 3 different options, which is just apply it to the shadows, override shadows, ambient occlusion, and color, not color, AO color, and then override mesh color. So if I want to override the poly paint, I can do it with a material. So you can do a really cool poly paint of something, and then apply a material on top, and then just blend it somehow. So the way that this works is you go to the texture, here, the texture map, and here is where you can choose the material that you want. So it just brings up the material palette. So let's set up something that's going to be, quite different or obvious to see. Let's have a look. Let's go for a yellow plastic. This is a custom material, but you can, I think you can get it from the ZBrush guides. I don't remember. So you'll see that it changes the material. So if I turn this on and off, I'm basically, it's like swapping materials like you would normally do, right? But then the way that this specific filter of material shading allows you to generate a lot of different variants is by, like I said, modifying how it is applied on top of the render and how it's blending based on, the ambient occlusion, the depth, and stuff like that. So actually, before I do anything, just so that we can save some time, I'm gonna enable ambient occlusion as well. I'm gonna turn this off. Render properties, turn ambient occlusion on. Alright, and do a render. And just rendering with the ambient occlusion is just gonna allow me to play around with the ambient occlusion settings in here as well. And that's just like an added level of control, but exactly the same thing as I had before. So Mr. Sanson, when the model is good, does it work in many colors? I'm not sure what you mean. Do you mean if the model is like the sculptural side of things of the model is looking alright? If you use many colors, would that ruin the illusion? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Alright, so let's just move on, and then if I can come back to that comment. Oops, sorry about that. Right, so I can turn this on. You can see the material being applied on top, but then you can click on this modifier, and let's just turn this on and off, and you see, so apply to shadows, you'll see that it's just being applied to the shadow. if you turn it on and off. It's kind of like deciding, yeah, I want this this material to cover everything and just ignore the shadows and ambient occlusion, override the shadows. But the one that really works for me is this override mesh color. So that is actually, you can turn off shadows if you want. So if you want the MatCap without any shadow, you know, it's just there. But in this case, I'll keep the shadows. So you'll see that this is pretty much like, you can set up all of these filters to have the same, what's the name? Material shading? Oh, no, sorry about that. I ruined it. Material shading, yeah, it's called material shading. Select the material and set the modifiers at 100%. Right, so you can set all of these filters to have to be using the same filter shading material, but in each one of those you can change a different material. So when you render, you'd have 12 different materials that you can export potentially if you wanted to. So I think this is really powerful. Just by tweaking, turning this on and off, you're applying an entire material without having to do the render. You have the shadows and all that, so you can do a high resolution render and just play with the different materials. So what is more cool about this thing is that you can apply it to certain areas. So let's say that I want to apply, let's turn it on and off. So I want to apply, let's see. So I want to apply this yellow color to all the red areas. Basically, I want to change the red color, not the green one. So the easiest way, actually, I'm going to turn on another filter. This is another one that I use. I'll explain this one in a second. So the easiest way to change color would be to simply create a new filter, go into filters and select something like the hue, right? So the hue filter is just like a hue saturation, well, like the hue saturation value in Photoshop, that you can use this hue slider to just change it. So that was my first attempt to changing the colors, because I had very contrasting colors. I could just, you know, tweak the combination of the colors. So you'll see this this green purple is very close. Let me just bring it on. Bring it close. Yeah, so you'll see that these ones for the most part are very similar to what you can do with just the hue saturation value, which I'm doing here. So that was my first attempt. But if you want to change a single color and not, like, let's say I want to change the red one, then you can use the filters here to decide, especially this area here, to decide which color you want to change. So that's what I did with the material. So that's how I started blending the material. So if I have this yellow, I not only want to change the color itself, but I also want to change the material. So I can start playing around with this. And let's say, let's select the color. So you can click on this and just drag to select the color, and you'll see as I move around over the character, it's just picking up different colors that are kind of like underneath this filter, which is pretty cool. So it's not choosing the yellow, it's choosing the red one or the green if I go around this area. So I'm going to select kind of like this color here, and then I'm going to increase the intensity of this RGB. Maybe that's too much. Something like that. And you can also play with the exponent of the RGB and how that is mixed. So with the hue, or based on the intensity of that color. So you see just this very concentrated area, and this is kind of like what I use for adding speculars. So I use another material to add specular in this area, using the mixing of the RGB intensity. Saturation. So saturation is not going to work in this case. But for the most part, once you kind of like have an idea of what these sliders do, you kind of just play around with them and see what result they give you. All right, I think something like that could work. So if I turn it on and off, you'll see that it's kind of like replacing mostly the red. I can just tweak it a little bit more, but the red, the green color is kind of untouched at this point. And this is just a few sliders that have to do with the RGB, right? And a single material. And you can also, you know, the material blend, material shading, you can reduce the opacity. So that is a very easy way to kind of like quickly enhance your renders, adding different materials and blending them together. Alright, now let's say that I want to add that nice kind of like, maybe it could be like scratches or a metal color, and we can just use that for, let's say that this is a metallic creature underneath, and then you can just scratch some areas and make it look like metal. So we can do that with the next material. So I'm going to click on the next one, turn it on, and currently again it's using the hue that we set up, which is actually not too bad, but that's not what we want to do, right? So let's go and click on filter hue and go to material shading. Alright, I'm going to reset this filter just in case, and from the texture this time I'm going to select something metallic. Let me just think, something that's going to be very obvious. I think with this color, maybe the droplet that has some blue colors, some blue highlights might work nicely, because it just complements the yellow. Alright, so let's put all the way up, and you'll see it becomes metallic straight away, but I just want to override everything. I don't know if the shadows actually, we'll see how it goes with the shadows. This is another great thing, it's kind of like non-destructive, you can just turn it on and off after you tweak it. So now we have this metallic look, which is a pretty interesting MatCap with this level of details. Hang on a second. Punto blend. Hola Pablo, desde Alicante. Buenas Pablo, Pablo González. Hola Pablo, how important would you say learning ZBrush for concept art? How important, that's an interesting question. How important would you say learning ZBrush is for concept art? I think it depends on what you do, but if you think about it, most of the work that I do, for example, is ultimately concept art. So I'm a concept artist and a character artist, but I do everything in ZBrush. So I think for me it would be super important, essential really, but not just because the capabilities that you have for concept art, but also because if you have to, for some reason, depending on your project, like I said, depends on the different things that you're gonna do, but depending on the project, if you have to take all the assets or the character, whatever you create, all the way to production and go through all the stages, you can still do it in ZBrush. And to me, ZBrush is kind of like my main tool of creation, especially because what I do is concept art. So just to answer your question directly, I think is very, very important. But if you want to concentrate on like more like 2D stuff and just do painting, I think might not be as important. However, I do a lot of sometimes paint over, so I just quickly mock up something in 3D, just cubes and stuff, putting in rendering in ZBrush, and then just export it maybe to Keyshot as well, getting the light from Keyshot and then just painting over. So in that sense, knowing some certain tools is just going to help you. Again, just going back, trying to answer that question a little bit more like straight to the point, I would say it's very important to learn ZBrush for concept art, at least for me. However, ZBrush at the end of the day is like any other tool that it's a tool, basically. That's my point. Like any other tool. So it's just up to you how you use that tool, really. I just think it's the best tool for the job. That's why I use it. But depending on what you're doing, you might find a different tool that does the work for you, and you feel more familiar with it. I just think it's better. And like I said, these type of things that I'm doing right now is the little gems that ZBrush has that I don't like. For me, it's hard to figure them out in another software, or it will take me longer. Where with this one, it's just snap of the finger and you get it. So let me just go back to this one. Oh, I don't know what I did. Oh, I think I moved, so I have to re-render. Hopefully that answers your question, Pablo. I'm not sure. I tend to just branch out too much. All right. So with this kind of like metallic render, what I want to do is just target certain cavities and certain cavities and details around here. So another thing you can do, or another method of blending that you can use, is the cavity. So you can take the cavity, let's say all the way to a 1. Let's see what that gives us. And you'll see just kind of like targets these cavities, but I don't think it's working that well. So let me just reduce that a little bit. And let's try edge detect. Maybe edge detect might be better in this case. Just increase the exponent. Right, so you can see that ZBrush is trying to, I don't know if you can see it there in the recording, but ZBrush is trying to target the edges that it's recognizing just to create that metallic look, but it's not working as I thought it would. So let's just set it back to 0, and then we can just do a blend of a couple. So let's start with cavity, and cavity already give us this kind of like nice lines closer to the edges, and let's increase the cavity exponent and the cavity radius, and this radius I'm just going to keep it very low, so I don't want to spread the effect too much from the cavities. And if I push it all the way up, we're getting there. So you can see a little bit of the metallic, but right now it's kind of like rendering like these areas here and all around the face. So I don't want to have like an outline of this color. So something you can do as well is use the Fresnel effect to reduce that effect. Sorry, so if you go to Fresnel effect, and instead of using it to 100 or to 1, I'm going to reduce it. So I'm going to set it to -1. So now the Fresnel effect is kind of like that edge that you get, or like the reflection that you get around the object. So the Fresnel effect, if I put it all the way to 1, this material is going to be only applied towards the like, let's say the normals that are 90 degrees away from the camera. I don't know if that makes sense. Let me just put it into, right, so if you have a sphere, and let's say this is the camera, right, you're looking at it in the front, the Fresnel effect happens here at 90 degrees kind of, and then you can just play around with that. So basically this effect that I'm applying at the moment is at a 1%, or a value of 1. So that means that this material that I'm applying, the shiny one, is being applied towards these towards the edges. So like I said, it's like 90 degrees from the camera. So that's 90 degrees based on the normals of the, I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's the idea. So if I just change it, hang on. So if I just change it to -1, right? So essentially, oh, sorry, -1. What did I do there? Hang on. So if I have it to 1, it's based on the surroundings. If I have -1, now it's in the front, right? So now that is at -1, what's happening is that ZBrush is shifting the effect. Instead of being towards the normals 90 degree away from the camera, is just shifting it to the center, kind of like here. So you have like the effect is basically pure based on the camera and then spreading towards the borders. Hopefully that makes any sense. But in this case, I might wanna, play around with the Fresnel effect. I'm gonna push it to -, so I don't have any on the edges, and then increase. Oops, not that one. Increase the Fresnel effect, the Fresnel exponent. Alright, so I'm just getting those like scratches, I guess, of this material, and I have this highlight as well that I don't mind it. So if I turn on and off, you'll see it. So it's getting a little bit shiny. But if you don't want, I don't mind it. But if you don't want it, what you can also do is use the same technique that we used before in the previous material that we added, the yellow one, to target certain areas. But instead of applying the material on that area, on the color, you just subtract it. So I'm going to select this red color. Remember that it's picking up the color underneath all these passes, all these filters. So we can take the intensity and just reduce it, the RGB intensity, and let's increase the exponent, or reduce it actually. There we go. Alright, so it's very subtle, but you have 12 slots or 12 filters that you can stack up and keep adding effects. So I can add another kind of like the same. I can just duplicate the same filter and then just target certain like different areas. So if I turn this on and off, you'll see that I'm getting some little, you know, scratches here and there that I think could work really nice. So far I've only done 2 filters, and it changes completely the look and feel of this character, or like the render. So I have the poly paint as it is with a skin shade. It could be actually any material that you choose to render and then just render on top. So I have the change of color to yellow, these added scratches, or these little bits and pieces of metallic material. So hopefully that gives you some idea. We're getting to 10 o'clock. I don't know if you guys want to have a look at some like sketching process, and we can just work on blocking up some creature, or if you want me to keep showing you some of these and just we go through the 12, I don't know, adding different filters, whatever you prefer. Like I said, I'm happy to today kind of like wing it. I don't have a specific outcome that I want to get. I don't have like a creature or anything in my mind, so I can just show you some sketching stuff, or we can keep working on the Vpr. So let me know in the comments. I'm happy to, you know, follow your suggestion. Hey Bruce, hey Ian, hey Bjorn Ragnarsson. Sorry if I don't pronounce that properly. Is this guy like a mutant holy man survivor of the nuclear apocalypse? Yes, sure it is. Cool. All right, so let me just do one more filter. I'd like to show you how you can utilize this same method of blending materials to generate kind of like some highlights as well, and you can target certain areas. And then we just move on, and we have like an hour, so I can just do a quick sketch to block out maybe like a creature head. And in the next stream, I'm trying to keep it, by the way, I'm trying to keep finish up stuff in 2 streams maximum, so that it doesn't get too boring and we can play around with different things. So we can start it today just blocking up some creature stuff. I'll show you some sketching techniques and sculpting techniques, and the next one, the next stream next week, we'll just finish it up. All right. Tariq saying, hey there, Pablo. I wanted to check you're doing the visual design of the shape further. So during the sketching process, I'm assuming. Yeah, I remember the email. Great. Excellent. So just let me do one more here. I'm going to select another material. This time I'm going to click on, I'm going to reset it. And I'm going to click on something specular like, let's try Chrome A. Nah, that's not going to work. Oh, maybe. File, Chrome. Maybe Chrome is working fine. Alright, so it has these nice highlights that I can just turn on and off. So we can take advantage of this material and blend it based on, first we can just change how it is blending, like the blending mode in Photoshop, and that's why I want to show you that this extra material. So if you go to blending mode here, you can just set it to add or screen. So add will be a little bit more intense than screen. Screen is a little bit more dull. I don't mind add actually. It has like a bit of a tinted color, so it just looks a little bit more metallic. Let's go for screen. But right, so now that we have this one sort of on top of this material, on top of the render, and it's set to screen. So in other words, any darker areas are going to be rendered as transparent. Then we can just go ahead and use the Fresnel effect, for example, and then reduce the effect so that we only have the highlights towards the camera, which is a counterintuitive. It's not a physically realistic effect. In fact, the Fresnel effect, or the more reflective areas, would be on that 90-degree angle. So if you just push it towards the sides, that is like a more realistic effect. But I don't want to create a realistic Fresnel effect. I just want to use the Fresnel effect to enhance some of the highlights here in front of the camera. So I can set up like that and just use the exponent, right? So turn it on and off. So that's looking good. Another thing I want to do is maybe focus only on the yellow area. So I'm going to select kind of like the red color here. Increase the RGB intensity, and this is pretty much the one that I use to control these highlights. And that's all right. So you'll see it's very subtle, mostly happening around this area, or more visible around this area, and a little bit on the hands, but I'm not worried too much about the hands. So you'll see this is a pretty simple and straightforward process. Once you have your poly paint in order, or at least you want to try different materials, different colors, then you can just do a VPR and use the material blending to blend materials. So I'm going to turn this off and show really quickly the ones that I use for converting this entire render into the blue one with the gold. So the first one is just using a hue saturation value. So nothing different here. I just change the colors like I showed you before. The next one, the second one, is just a contrast auto grade, so just to brighten up everything a little bit. The third one is the gold one. So this is a really cool one that I just turn on, and as you can see, I'm using kind of like this purple color, and I use the hue value at 100%. So if I reduce this to 0, you'll see it's completely gold, just purely gold. And the closer that I get to 100, the more refined that this gold beats, the more sharpened they get. Right, so you can play around with this, and you'll see it changes things dramatically. So it's pretty cool. Then you have this one, which is just a colorized color. So I use the black and the back and the front color to colorize things a little bit, and that is the one that desaturates the blue color. And I think this one has Fresnel. No, it doesn't have Fresnel. It has it has the mask, and it has again hue saturation. So color information. So basically, what I'm saying with all this is that if you want to use the material blending, concentrate on playing around with the RGB and these colors here. These are the most powerful. So that way you can just combine it a bit better. But you do need to have some color. So you need to have some poly paint in order to work with these ones particularly. If you don't have any poly paint, but you want to blend materials, probably these ones you're restricted to play around with Fresnel, shadow, and all that, which is still pretty powerful. The next one is just a Sharpen, so it's barely visible. The next one is an Norton, so again, just to brighten everything a little bit more. And this one is using the Fresnel effect, like I showed you like before. It's just an inverted effect of the Fresnel effect, so it is kind of like highlighting or targeting the areas towards the camera. And the other one, the last one, is again this material that enhances the highlights, or just gives some more specular, more wet look to it. But that's it. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how you can blend those materials. I think it's something that I just started doing recently, really, and I found it to be really helpful. So instead of doing all the compositing in Photoshop, or at least the final compositing, you can just get a very good looking render straight from ZBrush like this, and then you can refine it if you wanted to. Alternatively, what you can do, based on what I shared on Monday, I think, the quick cheat sheet for compositing, is that you can set all of these. I'm gonna open this one up. So you can set all of these to be anything you want. When I reset it, select material shading and select, let's say you wanna render something that looks blue and shiny, for example, right? You just override everything. Oh well, I have the other ones anyway. So you just override this, right? And then you export this material, so you can have different materials in all these filters. So that is pretty much it, right? So I'm gonna leave it like that, and let's just do some sketching, some block out of some creature. I don't know what to do at the moment. I don't have a particular idea or anything like that. Alright, so I'm going to start with a sphere, make it a polymesh 3D, and select a MatCap. I'm also make sure that symmetry symmetry is enabled. And let's start blocking, because I mean, blocking is where I spend most of my time, to be honest. So it's gonna take a while to get something that I like a shape. So I'm gonna select the move brush and the AccuCurve. And with a large brush, I can start. I'm gonna concentrate on kind of like making a face, see what it comes up. So this is purely, I mean, this is like very roughly sketching without really knowing what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn on Dynamesh. This is probably too much for a blockout, so I'm going to reduce. With Dynamesh, remember that the resolution of the Dynamesh is constrained, or is dependent on the size of the actual mesh. So so right now this one is I mean, it is relatively okay at 128. So if I if I decrease my mesh to this size and then just do another Dynamesh, you'll see without changing the resolution, you'll see I have less now. So it's based on the size. So this one is a bit more decent to block out stuff. I could even go a little bit lower, so I'm just gonna reduce this a bit. Redynamesh, and alright. So this is a good starting point to work on a creature. And again, I have no idea I have no references or anything. So let's hope that this doesn't end up being a rubbish one. Which, if I don't do preview, if I'm just sketching, sometimes it works, but most of the time it doesn't. So let's see. I'm gonna go with something similar to the guy that we have, maybe. So all I'm doing here is trying to work on the silhouette, something that works, that's interesting, based on the camera angle that I have here, and I have perspective on. But you'll see, I keep my tool set very limited at this point. I'm just using the move brush with the AccuCurve, and that's why I get these little pointy blobby things, which at this point, because I'm not concentrating on details or anything, I don't mind them. And in fact, just using the AccuCurve at this point, and giving, like, if I have all these points, let me just show you. I'm gonna let you into my thought process so that you understand what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So using the move brush with the AccuCurve, you get that very pointy, sharp point in the middle of the brush. So I'm getting kind of like these bumps, right? And that is just setting up kind of like the block, but I'm still getting these bumps. And what's great about this, at least for me, is that I can start getting like a suggestion of where the details might be. So here you can have, maybe the neck is already showing there a little bit. Obviously here you could have the jaw, but this area could be where the eye might be. This could be like a series of details that kind of like are in the temporal lobe or something. I don't know. Like I said, I don't have any idea where I'm going with this, but those little things, those little points that using the AccuCurve with the move brush, get those mistakes, if you will, they give you a base to design, I guess, and that's I think that's a pretty valid approach when you have no idea what you're doing. I mean, when you have no plan, not idea. You have an idea, but you don't have any plan. And just a quick Redynamesh. I think I'm gonna make something kind of like the opposite of what I tried. Not the opposite, but if you look at this guy here and the silhouette of this guy, again, just trying to explain my thought process in terms of playing around with the shapes and stuff. So skull-like, very like humanoid in that sense, like the skull, the proportions and all that. But the lines of actions, you have this very pointy jaw here, and obviously big head. Whereas if I move to the other guy, oops, something like that. Right, so what I'm trying to do with this guy is the opposite. Oh, just see what happens, see where we go. Instead of having a very pronounced kind of like jaw, I'm just gonna make it like a receding small jaw that sort of blends more into the neck. And instead of shooting this top of the head back like the previous one, maybe it's more pronounced towards the front. So they feel kind of like part of the same world, I guess, but maybe they have very different, I don't know, very different lives in this. So they're completely different races. I don't know, different demons or different ancient creatures. So again, this might be a little bit boring to watch because I do spend quite a bit of time in this part of the process, just figuring out, doing little tweaks, and this might change a lot, but I do spend a lot of time in this part, just making sure that the silhouette reads really well. The primary shapes are there. For example, here I've been practicing more of the neck area, because not the neck area, or the back and the neck area, in terms of anatomy, because that's the one that always gets me. It's like, for me, it's interesting. It's definitely very interesting, but every time that I start working on something, I always have to rely back on, just using reference to figure out how everything works. Although I know kind of like the insertion of the muscles, and I still need to check the references. So I've been just practicing a little bit more of trying to get this right, without relying too much on the references until I get to the point that I need to refine them. So that helps me. I mean, all that blubbery and all that is just to say that I'm trying to get the blockout stage without too many references, and then I do a whole pass of refinement just to get the anatomy right. I guess that's what I'm saying. I'm just trying to practice that without references, but at the end I always use them, or I always use the reference. Alright, so I think I like this part. I mean, doesn't look very obvious maybe to you, but this part here is kind of like a bulging of this side of the neck, so that might be interesting. I'll do a quick save and I'll show you something. So let's do Shift S here, and then I'm just gonna go back in time. So I think, yeah, around there. So although this has been just a few minutes of sketching, you can see the progression on the way that the shapes or the volumes kind of like transition. I don't know if I'm explaining this correctly, but the way that these are primary shapes. I'm not doing any secondary shapes at the moment, but you can see how you can see how the shapes. I'm starting to think more about the transition of the shapes. So how the one on the head or the neck sort of transitions into something else. So this one, it's just pretty plain, right? There's nothing there. But here I'm starting to think, all right, this one could transition to this area of the neck. You can have this, more hollow area here, and here's where the trapezius start to connect here with the acromion. I forgot. And then the same with this one. This one was just pretty simple, pretty straightforward shape. But then the refinement of this. This is what I'm letting you know, that I'm concentrating on those refinements of the transition of the shape. This one obviously is more obvious. Same with the shape of the head at the back, whereas this one is kind of like rounded. So that is the progression of the shapes at this stage, or what I'm concentrating on at the moment, is building up the block out and the main proportions and the primary shapes, but also focusing on how, just kind of like thinking ahead of how the different shapes will start to blend and to work together, and a bit more of the functional part of the design. Alright, so let's just go back to where we were. And I'll check the chat in just a second. I'm just thinking that this guy could be a bit more skinny. All right, so maybe I'm gonna try to make the head with all the details. How are we with time? Yeah, I think we're gonna be able to at least block out where the details are going to be, or show you that that technique of how I did the details on the other guy. Okay, so I think the other character that I did was kind of like bony and very, pretty much a skeleton with some, kind of like a fit skeleton, I guess. This one is going to be more, I don't know, I'm thinking something more fleshy, kind of like baggy skin. Again, not sure where I'm going with this. But all of this is part of the neck, so I'm just trying to figure that out. Here's kind of like the jaw. I guess at this point we could bring in the damp standard brush. It's not gonna be very obvious, but this could be the mouth of this guy around here, and I'm thinking the eyes, if I make any eyes, will be around there. But again, this is just already distracting me from the shapes, so I'm gonna remove them. That's just where I'm thinking things might be, but again, if I put them too early in the process, it could distract me from concentrating on the other shapes. Let's just do a redynamesh there. Alright, let me just check the chat, see if there's any questions so far. I know that this process might not be of too much interest for all of you guys. It's just chilling, basically, just chilling. Another thing that I'm thinking, just letting you know, that the other guy was very pointy, like the top of the head finish is very kind of like narrow, and I'm thinking maybe this guy I'll just do the opposite. All right. So yeah, let me just check the chat. If you have any questions or anything, all good. Can wait to the next stream. Great. That is astonishing piece, sculpting. Thank you very much, Yemelian. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Looks great. Thank you. 3D model person. I need a 3D model person. I don't know what you mean. Them cheekbones, though. What specifications do you have on your PC? I guess, Carlos. I have. I already forgot. I have a Threadripper 16 core 32 thread for the CPU. I have the RTX 1080 for the graphics card, and I have Windows. That's it. I'm not a very tech savvy person, but I did get some help from some friends that are IT guys that know, and some of my friends as well in the in the industry. They also gave me some suggestions. So at the end, I put together a guide. I'm just trying to find it here. Just to let you know where it is, and I'll share the link. So it's called 3D Workspace and PC Overview, and you'll get all the specifications, and you can even, get them yourself if you want. I don't know. Did you get the email there? If you go to the ZBrush guides, go to tutorials. I'll show you. If you go to the ZBrush guides and go to the tutorials page, you can just filter by. It's just one of these ones. This one, the Workspace and PC Overview. Just click on that. I'm just going to show you where you can get the exact same setup. So Ryzen, that's the name. So I forgot. Ryzen Threadripper. So if you go to this PC Park Picker, that is exactly the entire setup that I have. So I put all the parts that I'm using. So I'm using the 32 gig Corsair Vengeance and all these sort of things. Even the case, everything is in there. So you can just basically follow the same thing, or you can just remove. If you don't want the Threadripper, you want to remove it and just put the i7. I don't know. It's there. Just go to the ZBrush guides and you can get it from there. Alright guys, so we're pretty good with time, so I think I'm happy with how this is looking as a starting point. Alright, I'm just gonna duplicate this, leave it there, just as a reference of the blockout, and then I can show you kind of like a progression. I'm gonna increase the resolution a little bit, well, quite a bit actually, and then I'm just gonna smooth out things, just with a smooth brush, nothing fancy here. Just do a quick save. Alright, so now what I'll do is I'll continue with the move brush still, because now I can get even more pointy points. So you'll see with what I'm doing with the move brush is also creating kind of this line, which if you use the standard brush or the damn standard brush, it will be probably easier, but I just try to limit myself with the amount of brushes that I use at this point. So I'm thinking the jawline is kind of like here. I'm going to try to push in a bit, just bring in that line a bit more. So you'll see that I try to keep all this part, all this sketching a bit blurry and blobby, just to try to get the ideas where I'm gonna be putting more details and focusing on. Alright. So I'm thinking that maybe at this point I could just bring in the clay brush and start like working on a bit more of the secondary shapes, I guess. But keeping everything very smooth, so a lot of smoothing, just adding volume, like very systematic approach, I guess, in this sense, just adding volume, then smoothing. I'm just trying to define the mouth a bit so that you guys can see where I'm going with this. Again, that's the kind of like the jawline in there. not happy with these eyes here, so I'm gonna remove them. I prefer without eyes, but I'm just gonna work on the cheekbones and all the zygomatic arc, although there's no eyes. So I guess something that I can just tell you at this stage is that I use the move brush quite a bit, and obviously this is a bit faster than what I would usually do, or I will stay longer in that previous stage, like I said. But this point, what I do with the clay brush is, start refining start adding a bit of the secondary shades, but refining more of those primary shapes that I did with the move brush, and try to follow what I did. But it's very fluid. It's a very organic process. So if something doesn't work, instead of just going back and refine with the move brush, at this point I just use a different brush and continue adding volumes. So this is the one that I need to figure out what I'm going to do here. So I have kind of like the neck muscles here, kind of like going here underneath. Let's see what that gives us. It's always good to look at it from the distance and see if it's working. I think it's just this area is a bit problematic. It's not necessarily working for me. Maybe we can just fuse the jaw a bit, and that'll help. So it's not very well defined. that's kind of like the summary of this stage. Is everything's very sometimes blobby, sometimes just blurry. I'm trying to stay away from the details. I'm trying to stay away from that at this stage. Alright, so I think that's looking alright in terms of the main shapes. Still feel, if I look at it from the front, hang on. If I look at it from the front, it looks like this area is the mouth, which I don't want it to look like that. I need to refine more this area. So right now it looks like this is what it could look like to you. Kind of like the eyes here, the nose, and the mouth, right? But that's not my intention. So I actually want the mouth. So this is, this is kind of like the actual face. The rest is just blob and fat. So the eyes are here, and this is kind of like the jaw, and the mouth will be here. So it's a bit different. So that's what I'm saying, that this area, I don't know if it's doing or giving me the effect that I want. So I'm just gonna work on that a bit. So it could be just a matter of extending it a little bit, sort of like blending them with the actual sternocleidomastoid. Sternocleidomastoid. I don't know if that's, I already forgot if that's the name in English. Alright, so I'm gonna go back to the move brush just to refine these bits, because I think that's the one that I'm not liking. And I'm just gonna make the actual front of the head more prominent. I think I'm just subconsciously just going back closer to what I to the other design. So I'm just gonna do something drastically different. Maybe, I don't know. Nah, that looks horrible. Don't do that. Because the other one was, for the most part, it was pretty simple. It was just a skull with a, like an integrated skull into a fit body. This one is more like a creature. And I'm just trying to mimic a bit, kind of like those really tall hats from, like, in the olden times, I guess the priest have. If you remember in Aladdin, no, not Aladdin, in Notre Dame, I forgot the name of the evil guy, but he had like a hat that was very similar to this, like this shape, I guess. So I'm just trying to go for something similar, and that could be like a bony area. Alright, I'm gonna try to move along a little bit faster, and then if I have time later on, I'll refine this and share the process with you guys. But I do wanna show you some of the actual detailing techniques that I use for this guy, for the, like, how to make these all these patterns. So that might be something interesting for you. But if you wanna see something else that I did with the other guy, feel free to just let me know. Okay. So if you look at it from the distance, it still looks very blobby, but I think at this point we can bring in something like the trim dynamic or the edge polish, and just refine some of the planes. I mean, concentrating on the planes a little bit more. And this is going to change, but just to have a good starting point will be good. Alright, so at this point that I have like kind of this shape, I'm not entirely happy with it, but we'll just roll with it, and it might evolve into something that I like. I don't know. I'm not entirely happy with this, but at this point you could just start working with the standard brush, sorry, the damp standard brush, and add in some more landmarks and some not details. This is just like, I wouldn't call these details at all. This is just kind of like marking the sculpture to certain areas that you wanna work a little bit more and emphasize. So I'm not trying to do any details here. And I'm also using the Alt key just to push things for a bit. Alright, so you see this, this might look like details, but all I'm doing here is trying to establish kind of like a flow of the overall sculpture, just trying to see where how the details and the area of more concentrated details would be, but they're not details, it's just like marks. They look like wrinkles, but I will just add more volume later on. See, for example, this one is pretty prominent. I just decided to cut here because the eyes were looking kind of like like a fly. So I'm just gonna work on this area a bit more and just produce a bit of a cheekbone here. So hopefully this one has a bit more of a, it has, I mean, you can read a little bit better what I'm trying to do here. And this shape, it's weird. It's weird because, oh, yeah, I'll let you know what I'm thinking. So it's weird because this is kind of like a very geometrical shape, very squarish, but then this is very fluid. This is very pointy, and this is very curvy. So I don't know if it is a good contrast, to be honest. So I might just try to do something more, either more geometric here at the back, or make this top bit a little bit more organic, which might work actually. So it reminds me a little bit of that. So I'm just thinking, as I do this, reminds me of the shoe crab, I think, the one that has like a shell, like a big shell that looks like a horseshoe, and underneath it has all the. It looks like the alien thing, actually, the alien, in the Alien movie. Forgot the name. And actually, I was just reading something really interesting about the horseshoe crabs, that they're using them to I think the blood is blue, actually. It's like pure blue because they don't have hemoglobin, and they're using it like they're using them in medicine, and I thought it was really interesting. But what I really liked was the shape. the creature is just an alien creature, really. The horseshoe crab. I don't think it's even a crab. Just name a crab. But all right. So I'm just hopefully this looks a little bit better. Just refining this shape. I'm not sure if you can see what I'm trying to do here, but so here is kind of like the back of the head, I guess, and these shapes are blending into it. I'm gonna probably have to bring in the edge polish to define these planes a bit better. And the move brush as well. So instead of being just a cube here at the top that then kind of blends into the other one, I'm just trying to work on the transition so that it's one single thing. So it's a triangular shape, basically. That's what I'm doing. Kind of. And at this point, again, because I'm not worried about details, I'm still tweaking the shapes. We can do something with the, push things quite a bit just to create a more interesting silhouette. So you shouldn't be afraid to change things, and it has been changing quite a bit actually. So I'll do a quick time lapse of this. How will we time? We have 20 minutes. I think we're gonna get to a more defined stage before we end this stream. So if I move around back, you'll see it has evolved quite a bit from the original one. What I was trying to do here to this stage, which is, I guess it shows really the way that I would approach something like this when I don't have any idea. Just want to sketch freely. It's very organic process. The design actually happens within ZBrush. So with the previous sketch, the previous character that I showed you, I did a sketch on pen and paper, and I had it as an idea. But if you remember the one that I showed you at the beginning, it's very different from the final. The idea is there. Pardon me. The idea is there, but it's not 100% accurate. It's not exactly the same thing. So that is what I like to do inside ZBrush. I like to spend the time designing within ZBrush, or refining the idea in ZBrush rather than just copy a concept. So I use it more like a sketching tool as well, at this, like during the first stages of the production. Rudvik is asking, ¿usaste Marmoset para el render final de tu criatura o puro ZBrush Photoshop? He's asking if I use Marmoset for the final render of the creature or just ZBrush and Photoshop. For the Leucom Cavaliris, this one here, I use just ZBrush and Photoshop, and it's all explaining that that cheat sheet that I share with you guys. It's just Photoshop and ZBrush. Or you could put the eyes where the cheekbone would be. Where the cheekbone would be. So you mean around here? So the lines could be the eyes. That's possible. Yep. What application is that you're using Draw Open? Ah, yes. Sorry. Forgot. Nobody has asked this one yet today, but it happens every stream. So this one is the Epic Pen. So you just download it. I have the Pro version, so it allows me to do things, cool things like this. I can just go into Whiteboard, and then just do this, which is pretty cool. But you can just download the free one, and it allows you to paint. Because I have the Pro one, I think I have more colors. I'm not sure. But with the free one, you have plenty of this stuff. So I don't think you have the access to the blackboard and whiteboard, but that's it. It's called Epic Pen. It's pretty good. Hey Miguel, glad you're here. How's it going, man? Mr. Matson, Pablo is this going to cover just the model or the material you showed at the beginning? No, this is just the sketching. I mean, I already showed the material. I'm not sure. You mean the coloring, the poly paint? This is just covering the modeling, and I already show you how I approach the material and rendering. Maybe the next, yeah, because I don't think we're gonna get to a point where I detail this enough to go into poly paint. But next stream we can just get into that. We can do a bit of poly paint as well if this is something that has legs. All right, so I'm just gonna do a redynamesh because I haven't done one of those in a bit. Go to my clay buildup this time and just start refining these shapes a bit more. So all I'm doing here is filling up those lines that I created. So you'll see that the lines are not really details. They're just like marking points or areas that I kind of like remind myself, like, look, this is the area that you wanted to do. So like just go on and work on those. And using this clay, another thing I'm gonna do is hold Shift, and I'm gonna right click and reduce the intensity so that I don't destroy it, because I do like some of the details that this clay builder brush gives me, and I can capitalize on this and get some details from it. So this is a very, like you see, not only it's a very organic process, but it's very chill. I kind of like tend to zone out with this. I just saw a potential thing that I might like here, which is, let me see if that might work. So I'm gonna select my mask lasso. I'm gonna mask this like so. When you use the mask lasso, make sure that check the back, because it does mask based on the camera. Alright, so I have this bit here, so I just think, let's see what it does. Might be interesting just to push this out a bit and on the side. I mean, the shape was already there. I just I just thought that we could exaggerate it a little bit. and I think it kind of works. Obviously we have to smooth it and refine it a bit. Mr. Madsen, I thought you would do the material and all the things you did in this model here in the next stream. I could, yeah. I mean, I wasn't. I just wanted to show you show you guys the blending of the material. I wasn't planning to do like a full recreation of the character, but since we're already doing something similar, I'm happy to just take this further and use the next stream to do the poly paint, like just detail this a little bit and do the poly paint. No problem. I'm happy to follow the lead and just tell you guys can inform these streams. Totally happy to do that. I'm just saying that in this particular stream today, because we have about 15 minutes, we won't be able to do much. I'm happy for today we just leave the block out of this guy as it is, and in the next one we can concentrate on poly paint, on detailing a little bit, and poly paint. Now, is this a smaller model? It's yeah, it's a smaller project. Put it this way, we won't have to do as many things, but hopefully, in a kind of like a more contained project, I can show you the same techniques. We don't necessarily have to make like a massive project to show you the same things, and that's the other reason I'm trying to do this rather quickly. But just so you know and you're aware of this, all these stages that I'm showing you in this hour or less this hour, I would spend way more time. All right. I might leave the technique of the. Actually, I can just show you and then I'll refine it later on. But I'll show you the technique that I use for the for the symbols, and I don't know how you call it, the carvings, the symbols carved into the character. I use a couple of techniques, and I'll show you those too. They're really easy, so it won't take too much time. But I do want to have this refined before we finish. I'm thinking I'm just gonna push this in quite a bit. I'll create kind of like an inverted volume here, and that could help with the establishing some flow again. Some contrast as well, some concave and some convex shapes mixing nicely here. Alrighty, so very sketchy stuff, of course, but it's kind of like it's a good exercise just to chill a little bit and sort of get back into it, because I've been in holidays for almost 2 weeks and it's hard to get back to work. But I love what I do, so it's not that hard, and I do enjoy these little streams and hanging around with you guys. It's pretty cool. All right. I'm gonna definitely work on the neck and this part of how the neck sort of joins the torso, because it's not working right now. But again, I'll do that with more time and get it sort of ready to detail in the next stream. So to wrap up, we have about 10 minutes. Yeah, that's plenty of time to show you the techniques, I hope. So let's just do a quick save here. And I'm going to duplicate this one. And in this one, I'm just going to show you how I would go about adding those details that I did here. So I'm going to show you two things. Right, with this character, I have two different styles, or not styles, two different techniques. We have these sort of carved in, so this is the surface of the model. They're carved in, and they have like this kind of like details inside. So I'll show you that technique. And this one is actually the simplest one that you probably already know, which is just this is the surface. I used extract, so this is actually a different mesh, so it gets extracted, and just put on top of the surface. So those two techniques. The second one is pretty simple. Okay. So let's start with the simple first, because it is really simple. All I did with that one was using the mask brush. So holding Control and access the mask brush, you can just start painting. Painting the mask. Again, with the previous character, I did it a little bit more thoroughly than this, and I actually thought more about the shapes. Like I said, I was trying to develop like a language, so this is just random shapes. Alright, so let's say that you have, let's do a couple more here. Right, let's say that you have something like this, right? And you want to do the extraction. But before I do that, I want to refine this. So all I need to do is maybe I reduce the brush size. So something else that you can do with the control, the mask pen for masking is enable lazy mouse. So you see, as soon as I hold Control and I access my tools here, I can also hold Control and click lazy mouse, and that allows you to have a lot of control over the masking, right? So that's something very cool. So I'm going to invert the mask and then just refine kind of like the end bits of this, so they don't look blobby a little bit. So this is just painting back the mask. Alright, so let's invert that. And it is actually really simple. All you have to do now, once you have something that you like, the mask, and you don't have to just paint it with the mask pen. You can also bring in you can design it in Photoshop or Illustrator, bring it into Photoshop, bring it into ZBrush as an alpha, and then just project that alpha or drag that alpha within the mask pen. So that's another thing that if you don't know, it's like whoa, like when I first started playing around with that, it's like, ooh, this could be something interesting. You can hold the Control key and you can actually change dots for drag rect, and you can change alpha for anything you want, like alpha thing. So it's like dragging an alpha, but it's actually dragging a mask. Maybe this one is easier. So I'm just dragging the mask. Obviously you can tweak this. Right now there's a fade there. So if you want a sharper mask, all you have to do is right click, holding Control. It's gonna be hard to show you with my custom UI because I don't have those controls, but it's just changing the focal shift. That's it. Let me just get back to what I had with my normal mask pen. Alright, so now you have the mask and you're happy with the mask, you can go to extract here at the bottom of the Subtool subpalette, and you determine how thick you want it to be and how embedded. Sorry, no, that's not where the embedded is. This is how smooth the surface is. For the most part, I just leave it as it is because this is going to give me a extruded version based on the surface. So it's going to I'll just show you what it is instead of, and I'm sure you're familiar with this. So this gives me a preview. So if I move around, it disappears, but you see it's a pretty thick. So extract, you'll see it's very thick. Maybe if you want to reduce the size a little bit before you create it, you can go to the masking and go shrink mask and also sharpen. You might have to go back and refine it a little bit, but this is another way that you can refine your mask. I'm gonna go back. I'm happy with that, and I'm gonna extract, but I'm gonna make it less thick. So I'm gonna go 0.5 Oh no, that's not enough. 0.01, 0.01. Okay, and click extract, and this is what I'm getting. So I might have to clean these areas a bit because they're too close. Let's see, extract. Whoops, did the inverted one. Extract. So that's fine. Maybe just all right. I'm just gonna do this so I can show you the other one. I'm gonna click extract, and if you're happy with this, you can just play around with these ones. I'm gonna click accept. So this becomes a separate mesh, right? So remove the masking, and I'm gonna go to turn on polyframe, and you'll see I have a nice set of polyframes. So this is really handy. Before I do anything, actually, I'm just gonna remove these extra bits that I got there for some reason. So hold Control Shift, hold Alt, and remove those, kind of like hiding them, and do the same thing for these ones. Control Shift, hold in Alt, and then I'm just gonna delete that. Okay, so now because I have these polygroups, I can go to polygroup, not polygroup, sorry, deformation. Where's deformation? Deformation, and I can polish these by groups. So I can just polish by groups like that, and you'll see it gets polished, but it maintains that hard edge. And if you want something softer, you can just polish them like this, and then just polish by group again. Something that I did was using the clay polish as well. So I click clay polish a couple of times, and you see it just started changing. So this, I mean, this is more of a different technique, but I wanted to show you how to generate it. But that's roughly what I did. So you have these details already there. Those are the ones that are sticking out. Now the other ones that are a little bit, I think, are cooler. I'm gonna remove the mask. So I have this, as you can see, in a different subtool. So that's why it's just easier to paint them all with one color or assign a different material. So this one could be, you know, could be gold. So I'm gonna select material and fill object, and then go back to my sketching one. So you'll see I have a different material here because it's a different subtool. That's pretty straightforward. So what I did with the other ones that are kind of like embedded and have a bit more of a rich detail was using the layer brush and the morph target. So we're about to finish here, but I have enough time to just show you quickly what I did, like an overview. And then I'll just check the chat. If you have any questions, just put it in there. So basically what I did was save a morph target. So I have it here in my UI. I store a morph target, and then I go to my layer brushes, or select the layer brush, this one here. And this is really cool effect because once you have the morph target, the depth of the layer brush is going to be consistent. So if I hold Alt, hang on, I'm in solo mode. There we go. If I hold the Alt key, this one is not very noticeable. I'm just going to increase the intensity so that it's very noticeable. Make it a bit bigger. So if I hold the Alt key and just press, right, I create this type of effect. But because I have the morph target, if I go over the same area, you see it's the same height. It doesn't. Let me just show you the normal effect. I'm going to delete my morph target. If I hold the Alt key and create this with the layer brush, and then let go, move around, and then do another one, you'll see it's just going to add depth, and it's going to keep adding depth. So it's going to be very hard to maintain like the same level. So that's why you do a morph target before. So store morph target, and that way you can just start the designing of these things like that. Right. It is essentially the same thing that I did with the mask before, but with a bit more control. And if you don't like something, it looks too blobby, that's why you have the morph target, because then you can go and bring in the morph. So let's say that I'm happy with this using the layer brush. Then you would go with the morph brush, and this is essentially kind of like an eraser eraser brush that allows you to go back to the stored morph target. So to the current to the previous height. So I can just do this very quickly like that, and just refine the borders, for example. And that's kind of what I did. Not kind of, that's exactly what I did with the proper guy. All right, so you have this like that, and then I don't have too much resolution in this guy, but what I did was reduce the size of my morph brush and just go manually inside these areas and just do this type of thing. So that's just a manual job, but I try to do it like, you know, that, try to follow like a pattern, but very randomly. Yeah, that's pretty much what I did. So this is just the morph brush, and you get in these details. You could do the same thing with the standard brush. The reason I prefer this to do these details with the morph brush is because it is basically, you won't go any higher than the previous level of the surface. So in other words, let's say I can just paint this here, and if I go over the same area, I'm not gonna get any higher than this, because it's just part of the store morph target. No matter how many times I go over the same area, it's gonna level up up to that point, if that makes any sense. So I'll just explain it here really quickly. So if this is your surface, if you're looking at it from the side, and you use a morph target, it will store this level, right? So this is the morph target, or the height of this surface. And then you use the layer brush, and then you push in, right? So this is all layer brush. So when you use the morph brush, right, to bring back those details, no matter how hard you push, you're not gonna pass this line. So you can do things like this and just bring it up a little bit, or you can just do this, right? But it's not gonna go over that morph target, the height of that morph target. So that's why I prefer to do it that way, so that I don't, you know, it maintains a nice consistency, and it looks like carvings rather than just added mesh, or added details, or added depth into the surface. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it is definitely an interesting technique. So that's pretty much what I did here. And if I get closer, obviously this one has a bit more work and more time. Okay. Let me delete morph target. Alright, so see, I mean, the undecimated version has a bit more details, but it is essentially the same thing. I just follow what I just showed you, and then obviously I painted it, and that's why it looks a little bit more interesting. But that is it. That's it. The techniques are very simple. It just require you to, you know, spend the time and do it. So that's it, guys. What I'll do is I'm gonna, you know, refine this a little bit so it doesn't look as bad as this one. But I think it has potential, so we could just refine it, add some details, and revisit some of the techniques that I showed you today in the next stream, and then hopefully some poly paint. So yeah, so hopefully that gives you some ideas of how I used it. Again, I'm just gonna give you again this link. Where is it? In case you wanna get it. So it is in the ZBrush Central. If you go right now, you can click on this one. See at the top, or you can just search for it. Let me see if I can find it. I haven't actually used it. So the cheat sheet for compositing. So yeah, if you just search the cheat sheet for compositing, click on this one, and here at the bottom you'll have, this is the preview of the guide. This is just showing you how I use the different passes, which you will get the high-res passes, and just click on this cheat sheet for compositing, and that's it. You'll get the guide. The guide comes, like the PDF comes with the high-resolution render passes, so all the render passes that I use from ZBrush, and they're pretty straightforward. I think I only use 2 or 3 materials which come with ZBrush, but the rest are just the normal depth pass, mask, clown, or or material ID, and you can get all of those from ZBrush, and I'll explain that in the PDF. And you also get the compositing PSD file, so it's the high-res file, which basically, yeah, you can just download and follow and see all the different layers that I use, all the effects like the smoke, the painted background, everything is in layers, so you can just turn it on and off and see what I did there. And hopefully that gives you an idea and help you with your own compositing. It looks, I think it looks good, but it's pretty straightforward, and it's a very simple method, just a series of steps, and that's what I try to do with the guide, just to systematize or create a systematic approach to compositing. So you do different steps, and if you follow them, hopefully that'll give you something cool. So I'll look forward to see what you guys make with this guide, and if you do, I have a hashtag at the end of the guide, so if you share something, I will check that hashtag. It's just ZBrush to Photoshop, the number 2, ZBrush to Photoshop, so I can just check what you guys are doing and hopefully give you some feedback on that if you want. But yeah, that's it. Let's just leave it here. Let me check the chat. If you have any questions, last minute questions, I will answer them. Going through everything will be great. Yeah, no worries. This would be awesome if it did not mess up your scheduling. It does not mess anything up, Mr. Manson. It's all good. That's what I'm here on the ZBrush guide, ZBrush Live, ZBrush guys in the ZBrush Live, just to provide any help that I can. It's just a cool, chill time for me. And if you guys are learning something from it, the better. In your opinion, this bust would look good in a beginner portfolio, or would still be good enough? Yeah, I think it doesn't matter what you work on as long as you are presenting it well. And I mean, if you want to be an environment artist, then probably having the bust might not be the best idea. But if you want to be a creature artist, why not? I'm sure it will help. It's just a matter of how you present it, like how professional you want to look. If you just take a screenshot of ZBrush with the horrible gradient, that's just not going to be good enough. That's just going to be not even a work in progress. If you're just doing something for a client, for example, and you do work in progress, for at least me, I just try to present them like very polished version of the work in progress. So I know that it is. They will know that it is a work in progress. It's not the final one, but it's not presented kind of like a screenshot and say, hey, here is what I'm working on. I would try to, either framing it properly, do some lighting, sometimes most of the times in keyshot, so it's just faster, and just save that and share it as a work in progress rather than just a simple, a screenshot. So I don't know if that answers the question, but it's about how you present it and try to target your portfolio, I guess, to what you want to do. Hevelin Silva. Let's see if I can do this. Oi, eu sou do Brasil. Qual curso você fizeram? Qual curso você fizeram de design gráfico? I don't know if I did, if I said it properly, but let's see if I can understand what he's saying. So she's from Brazil. He's from Brazil. Which course have you done for a graphic designer? So Evelyn Silva, I think that's what she's saying. I speak a little bit of Portuguese, but I'm not sure if that's similar to Spanish, I guess. Which course I did as a graphic designer? I studied years ago. I studied digital animation back in Costa Rica, and then I did a master's here in Australia on animation and interactive media, which right now that's one of the classes that I teach at university or college for American listeners. Buddy Ruda, glad to see you again. Glad you're here. I recognize my old fave 5.1 total beach headphones. They're awesome. This is really nice trick. Great. Thanks so much. Thank you for stopping by. Puedes meter una textura en Photoshop con UV mal de use ZBrush o es mejor Spotlight. So Ivan is asking whether I can take a texture into Photoshop with UVs or a texture. Sorry, I'm not understanding the question. You can bring into ZBrush any picture, any image, and use it as a spotlight if you want to just project that texture. Hopefully that answers it. What is necessary to decimate it? Was it necessary to decimate it? No, but not for the render, not at all. I just wanted to see if I could just set it up for printing, and that's why I also added the little base. So this is the decimated model that has only, well, this one is pretty high, has almost 3 millions, but it's not necessary to decimate it, not at all, not for the render. Imagine that this one is the decimated one, and it has like almost 3 millions. So the actual project is way bigger. That's why I didn't load it for today. Miguel Guerrero, awesome technique, dude. Thanks so much, Miguel. Means a lot coming from you. Glad you're stopping by. I still can't figure out how to add background on Photoshop when I export the project. I'll check your PDFs. Yeah, that's all covered in that PDF. And all it is if you go to your render palette. I mean, all of this is covered in there. But when you go to the render passes, you have all of these passes already. So you just need to export this one. That's the one that has the color. If you export the composition, is the one that has the filters already applied. But to answer your question, you can just need to export this one, the colored one, or the shaded one, and the second one is the mask. So you use the mask. Whatever is white in Photoshop is gonna be visible, and whatever is black is basically transparent. So you can put anything behind it. But again, that's all covered in that cheat sheet. Mr. Manson, good Portuguese. Muito obrigado. Congrats on the website work on those tutorials, Pablo. They're great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Glad you like them. And Rafael says, muy interesante, gracias. Very interesting. Thank you very much. All right, guys. So thank you so much for stopping by. It's been a while, a couple of weeks, if not more. But I'm really glad to go back to the regular scheduling on hanging around here with you guys. It's definitely one of the highlights of my week, just chilling and sharing a little bit of what I know and hopefully answer some of your questions. Again, feel free to go back to the ZBrush guides and the ZBrush Central and download that guide. I'm looking forward to see what you guys come up with the resource that I shared. Other than that, I'll see you next week, I guess. Same time. The schedule is already on the ZBrush Live, so you can just check it. But yeah, same time, and yeah, good to see you. See you guys.